What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So, this is a requested video from one of my subscribers, and he wanted me to talk about the Chris Benoit tragedy. And it's been 14 years. It's been 14 years since this happened. As hard as it is to believe. And at that time, me personally, because I'm talking about these things from my perspective, and I'm trying to see if you guys can relate to my viewpoints or my perspective, right? So at that time, I wasn't watching wrestling quite as religiously as I once did. I mean, at one point, going back to Hollywood Hogan, WCW, WCW Nitro, and then when they phased out and fizzled out, and then Attitude Era WWE, Raw, that was must see TV. By 2006, 2007, I was still watching it, but a lot of the talent that I had grew to love and like were starting to retire. The Rock was making movies by then. Stone Cold had largely retired by then. And there were still enough people left, but, you know, it was changing a little bit. It was starting to, even then, you could see they were starting to eliminate shit, which was good in the long run. But you could see the change coming for them starting to cater to a larger market and getting away from the attitude shit. So I think by 2009, that's when I kind of like just said, "Fuck it, I can't watch this shit anymore. It's stupid." Whenever you start having, what I'm saying, the Three Stooges as co-hosts, it's time. It's time to. And I love the Stooges, but they don't belong on, But Raw is where I found out about his murder, or the murderers. And at the time, they just found three dead people in the house: him, the son, and the wife. So it was reported as if all three of them had been murdered. Now, at that time in Raw, there was this angle about Vince McMahon dying or something like that. That was abruptly ended. That show was not kayfabe. It was wrapped around and dedicated to Chris Benoit, the wrestler. Uh, at that time, there had been quite a few wrestlers that had unfortunately passed. Owen Hart several years earlier, the British Bulldog, Mr. Perfect, Bam Bam Bigelow had been deceased by then. Um, I want to say Scary Sherry had just passed, literally a week prior at that time. And of course, the one I want to connect the most to this is Eddie Guerrero. And if you look at when Eddie Guerrero passed, I think it was November of 2005. When you look at the wrestlers when they did that tribute to him, out of you can understand Chavo's pain, but it's like Chris Benoit just. I really think Chris Benoit shattered mentally. Whatever was left of his sanity was beginning to crumble at that time. They were really close, from what I understand. Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. There was a lot of speculation at the time as to what happened. There was some speculation. This comes from Chris Benoit fans. I think it's bullshit. He's been cleared that it was Kevin Sullivan that did it. Kevin Sullivan, also a wrestler, one time married to Nancy Benoit. I don't think that happened. Coincidentally, on the same day of, or around the same day of the murders, Chris Benoit's former partner, Biff Wellington, I think it was his name, uh, died of a heart attack. Or at least he was found dead. He may have been dead 4 years, 4 days prior to that. That's I think was just a coincidence. Some people was trying to see if there was some connection or some bigger, or conspiracy or whatever. But this is what I think happened, man. I think at one point in time, Chris Benoit was a relatively normal person. I think what happened to him is what happened to a lot of wrestlers that wrestled in the 70s and 80s and 90s and went far beyond the call of job duty to be fan pleasing and company pleasing. And that includes taking steroids, that includes doing a lot of aerial assault type moves, taking chair shots, especially real chair shots, and just going through the aches and pains of being a wrestler 48, 49, maybe 50 weeks out of the year, getting very little time off, suffering concussion after concussion after concussion, and not having them treated. I think that's what happened to Chris Benoit. And I'm not trying to make him out to be a victim because what he did was still disgusting. But I do think that what happened is you got to look at the science. You know what I'm saying? You got to look at the evidence provided. And if he was already a man who was somewhat prone to violence, CTE, chronic brain injuries, I've read that when they looked at his brain, all four lobes were damaged. He had damage to his brain stem. His brain resembled that of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. And Chris Benoit basically, at that time, was suffering from dementia. 40 years old, but he was suffering from dementia. Um, I think the last person he talked to, or one of the last persons he talked to was Chavo Guerrero, who I believe was the cousin of Eddie Guerrero. And like I said, I think when Eddie died, I think it took someone away that Chris could relate to and keep him in the world of sanity. And I think he slowly slid out of that shit. I think that he didn't have a good relationship with his wife, Nancy. She had filed for divorce 4 years before this situation. A lot of their problems stem around their son. Um, I don't know the details of it, but apparently their son had some type of growth problem. Maybe their son wasn't manly enough. I don't know. Kind of reminds me of like an even more extreme version of the Anthony Soprano and AJ shit, you know. Um, but ultimately, Chris Benoit was a madman at the end, and he took time. I think he had planned it out by that time. He just decided that he was going to kill her and kill himself. Um, at that time, not much was known of CTE. Now, a lot more is known of CTE, and that's why I'm more convinced now that he was not in his right frame of mind. I think at that point he thought that he was doing God's will or something by killing them, like a mercy killing or something. Um, According to the timeline, first he killed his wife. Um, he bound her by the legs and the arms, and strangled her with a cord, I believe, from the back. Broke her, how is it, the hyphen bone in her neck. After that, it's generally you're once that happens, you're pretty much a goner. Um, and she struggled, and I think she bashed against him a couple times, which would explain why she had blood in the back of her head. But he strangled her and killed her, and I think he killed her that Friday night, that Friday evening. Um, then I think because at this time he had contacted them, WWE, and said that he wasn't going to be able to appear at that evening, that weekend's pay per view event. It was at that time, I think, when he called Chavo, and he didn't sound right, according to Chavo, and saying that Nancy and the boys were sick. They were vomiting, food poisoning. They both were vomiting blood, and that he wouldn't be able to attend or whatever. And Chavo thought that he didn't sound right. He didn't sound like his normal self. So he called him back 15 minutes later. He didn't answer. And then I think Chris Benoit called him back. At that particular time, it's quite possible he may have been committing her murder at that time and then called back. I don't know. He said he didn't sound right. And again, and he said at the end, Chavo, I love you, and hung up the phone. And the way he said it, I love you, it didn't sound right. It was the tone. It was weird. Um, at that point, like I said, he was demented. He was a demented person. He killed his son the next day. First, he gave him a sedative, and then um, put a plastic bag over his head and suffocated him. Now, police said that he had internal injuries. I don't know whether Chris Benoit was hitting him physically. I don't know what that was about. Okay, and I don't even want to think about it really. And then early the next morning, Sunday morning, he sent text messages to Chavo Guerrero and to a referee, I believe, that he knew was friends with. He gave them the physical address and said there were dogs in the home and that the garage door was open. He sent these text messages from his phone and from Nancy's phone, by that time deceased for several hours, um, several hours. Of course, Chavo thought this was very strange. Um, you know, then Chris went and hanged himself. I think he used some type of weight machine that was connected against the wall. He took the weights off, put a towel around his neck, put the cord around his neck, released the weights. It brought him up and snapped his neck. The force of it broke his neck, and he killed and he died. Um, this was Sunday morning. Um, Nobody was able to contact them afterward. Shaw tried to contact Chris. Nobody, other people tried to. They couldn't get in contact with him. Sunday turns to Monday. Monday, I think Benoit was supposed to be there on Raw. Still, nobody could contact him. Then Chavo, I think, had brought it up to maybe Vince McMahon or others that, and other people as well. I think the referee said, "Look, man, we got these weird text messages from him, and I'm getting concerned." So WWE contacted local police. I think they were in Georgia. I think where they lived at. Police arrived, and that's when they discovered the carnage. Uh, Nancy, by this time, had been dead for about 2.5 days, going on, I think, 2.5 days. Now, you have to remember, this happened in June in Georgia. So it can be quite warm down there. I don't want to get too graphic, but I don't think the AC was on. It could get up to 90 degrees or so. So what I'm saying is, even though that's not a long period of time, um, by the time they got to her, and I warn people, if you do some looking up photos, be warned. These photos can be very graphic. She had already started decomposing by that time. She was already starting to turn dark, black, and by that time, bugs had gotten to her. She started having flies laying larvae, and it was nasty. It was gnarly. Okay. Um, Her son wasn't really that far along as far as decomposition. He was still in a pretty good shape. The mother had decomposed quite a bit. Chris was not really at that state yet. Um, it's fucked up, man. Um, it's one of these situations where you want to explain it from a scientific point about what happened, but it's like you're giving him an excuse. You know what I'm saying? Um, when you say dementia, brain damage, that doesn't necessarily mean that every person that has dementia or brain damage is going around doing that to people. They're not. Um, I do want to say this though. His death did help to spark more research into CTE. His death, uh, people like maybe Dave Durison, others, Junior Seau, um, their passings and their struggles. Mike Webster, the granddaddy of it all, longtime center for the Steelers. Um, his situation, other players. This has led to more research with CTE. They say it's a real problem. It's not something that can be diagnosed until after death. They said that Bubba Smith had CTE. Like I said, not every person who suffers from this problem is going to be a violent, sociopathic person. I think it's the person's. This is how I look at it. If you're a person who's prone to anger, but your moral compass and your logical mind keeps you from doing things, but then when you suffer from this problem, that no longer is the case, and like your impulses take over. That's what I think CTE does. But when I read it's hell, like a lot of people say that it's just the people that have had CTE and all these other problems or untreated concussions, it can cause a lot of cognitive impairment. A lot of these people go through absolute fucking hell. They're hearing voices. They hear, like headaches and brain fog, and it's just fucked up. You know what I'm saying? And you have all of these different problems that people have. Uh, you know, I don't know, man, but it's just a fucked up stain. To me, the bigger culprit in all of this shit is Vince McMahon. When you look at all of the wrestlers over the years that have pretty much died from either steroid abuse and or brain injury, CTE, substance abuse. And you could all tie that shit directly or indirectly to Vince McMahon. He's the one that introduced the prevalence of steroids. He's the one who, uh, well, before him, most wrestlers they had dad bodies. It was the focus was more on the art of wrestling. Then it became more about the look. Hulk Hogan kind of started that shit too, but Vince McMahon was the top guy. Vince McMahon is the one that emphasized that the wrestlers had to have a certain physique. So these guys like the British Bulldog and others who didn't naturally have that muscle mass, you know what I'm saying? Macho Man's another one. He didn't naturally have that type of body. They had to take all these anabolic steroids. They had to do all these things to have the certain bodies. You know, they had to alter their wrestling style so they'd be more appealing to Jimmy Fly Snuka's, another guy who most likely murdered someone and had CTE and mental problems. So this is something that is a sickness of WWE, in my opinion. As bad as the NFL is, WWE is terrible with this. And this is the biggest stain, I think, on Vince McMahon and the WWE. And it's funny because as the evidence came out that Chris Benoit murdered his family, it wasn't a victim of a triple homicide, but he murdered his family. That show was forgotten about. I don't think they've ever re-aired it because it was like they were, they in their mind they fucked up and gave tribute to a murderer, and they deleted. He's pretty much deleted from their history, Chris Benoit. But Chris Benoit most likely wouldn't have gotten to that point if WWE had recognized that there was something wrong with this man, and they could have gotten this guy some type of treatment earlier on, and maybe, just maybe, that would have been prevented. I'm not excusing Chris Benoit of everything he did that night. It was despicable and heinous and atrocious. But I do say this. I don't think he was in his right mind. I really don't think that he was in his right mind when he did what he did. You know what I'm saying? Just like I don't think Julius Seau was in his right mind when he did what he did. Just like that young man who was only 32 years old when he killed those five people. I don't think he was in his right mind when he did what he did. There's something more prevalent going on in our society with sports. That's why when it comes to our society and contact sports, that's why I'm all for, when it comes to the NFL, I'm all for changing the rules and making it less um, dangerous as far as the sport. When it comes to contact sports, now there's some people who say shit like this. Well, they know the dangers when they get into that sport. That's on them. They make all that money. Like, shut the fuck up, man. I tell you what. How about when you become when you work for a corporation, right? And you you work for a corporation and your productivity go down for a quarter, right? You don't have whatever. You have a bad job performance. And since you know the dangers of your job, right? Because you make all that money, uh, they get to bash you in the fucking head with a baseball bat 10 times. I mean, because you knew that was part of the job, right? You knew that you would make all that money and have all these perks, but if you don't perform at the right level, the CFO gets to bash you in the fucking head. Or better yet, your boss gets to fuck your girlfriend. Because That was written into the contract. No, see, that's how I look at it when you say dumb shit like that. Just because you're an athlete doesn't mean that you have to go through a entire fucking post career of pain and misery and agony. Especially when it comes to these wrestlers. They don't make money like that. And even in the NFL, they make the lowest amount of guaranteed money out of all pro sports. They shouldn't have to go around for 20 or 30 years living like they're fucking elderly Alzheimer's patients. No, fuck that. Just because you want to see bone crushing hits, just because you want to see a Joe Theismann leg break, you want to see a guy laid out concussion because that gets your rocks off. Fuck that. Now, that's one thing to as far as the NFL and it's being, I mean, excuse me, the NBA and it's pussified. I get all that shit. Yeah, it's very pussified. But I don't want to see motherfuckers go out there and get hurt. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Tell me what you guys think.